Our third case study, Who Owns the Indigenous Artefacts from Canada to Cairns, provides us with a conversation starter about the contemporary and contentious issue of the repatriation of cultural artefacts. Our context is Cairns. Our global context is Canada. Now about Cairns. We're talking about a city located on the east coast of the Cape York Peninsula, between the Coral Sea and the Great Dividing Range. The traditional custodians of the Cairns area, the Gimuway Wallabara Yinji peoples and the Irukandji peoples, are located in one of the most beautiful parts of Queensland. Let's take ourselves now to the next slide. In order for us to investigate the issue of the repatriation of cultural artefacts, what we've done here is begun with a story located in Canada, the story of the return of the Gippsgalucks pole. And what this does, that is, taking a global context first before we look at the situation in Cairns, is open up a connection that is global in terms of the experience of many First Nations people who are endeavouring to find and bring home precious cultural property that was collected often through colonisation. And the way in which we do that with this particular story is watch the first 2.5 minutes of a lengthy and fascinating film situated in Canada, a film that traces the journey of the Haisla people who try to bring home a funerary pole, and successfully do so actually, to their British Columbia village from the Stockholm Museum. And when you watch this first 2.5 minutes, a very good routine to engage your students with is what makes you say that. So after watching the film, we ask, what do you think is going on in that film? And then, why, or rather, what do you see that makes you say that? So we're looking for interpretation of what was seen with justification, always finding opportunities to challenge our students to give reasons for why they think the way they do. So we take that big picture, that global look through this extraordinary story, and then we move to our next routine. Now with this routine, often the way we like to go about doing it is upfront, one of our early routines, so that we can develop some mystery and we can engage our students in a point of stimulus. In this case, it's a photograph of what would seem to be a necklace. You would present the photo to your students, maybe multiple copies, each copy situated on a poster sheet. Students in groups look at the picture and follow through this questioning sequence. What do they see? Very plainly, what do they see, without any interpretation or inference? Then secondly, what do you think about what you see? For example, I might say, I think they are shells, and I think that because they have a shiny pearl look about them, and I've seen that before in the ocean or at the beach. And thirdly, what do you wonder about what you see? For example, the question might be, where did that necklace come from? So in answering these three questions, we are now ready to go a little bit deeper. And perhaps if you have used this particular routine in sequence with the first, and your students have learnt a little bit about the Canadian story and the Haisla people and the return of the Gippsgalucks pole, they might be making some wonderings about perhaps whether this item was collected from some time ago and ended up in the hands of people who may like to keep it as an exhibition item. Let's find out. Okay, what we have here is a photograph of an item that was on display in Canberra during an exhibition of items that came from the British Museum to Canberra for an Australian audience to view. What you are looking at is the Nautilus shell necklace, a Yidinji people cultural artefact collected from the Cairns region in the very early 1900s, late 1800s, by a gentleman called Derwin Vallance. The quote there notes, "The shell, the ornaments, are believed to have magical presence. They are like diamonds or gold. It gives status and energy." The quote indicating the significance or importance of that particular necklace. Now you can see this photograph and a whole lot more by going to the Encounters Indigenous Cultures and Contact History Teaching resource at that website link to the National Museum of Australia. When the artefact came out here from the British Museum exhibition back in 2015-2016, items were photographed and then returned to the British Museum, and this photograph was one of those. That is a necklace, and a fantastic teaching resource was constructed for you to access online. Please take the time to look at it. We have included items from it here, including the photograph. Moving on with our story here though, we can see in the image on the right an image of the peacemaker, the King of Cairns, an influential community leader, Iine, taken in 1905, and in his hair, perhaps, he is wearing something like the necklace, a headband, a shell headband. We're going to learn a little bit more about him in the next slide. Our third routine. Now, what we did in this case study of Cairns connected to Canada is provide you with two routines. We felt that they were both very important tools for taking a look at this complex and contentious issue around the repatriation of cultural artefacts. Now, here, now, there, then routine provides you with an opportunity to encourage your students to consider past perspectives with present perspectives, to develop an understanding of how our thinking can change over time and across cultures, to help us understand that we can have strong stances in controversial issues, and that our stances are influenced by our social and historical context. It's a way of uncovering also stereotypical perceptions, as well as attitudes which might be ethnocentric and consist of presentist judgments, judgments that don't engage with the full picture, the historical chronology or cultural context. And the way in which we can do that with this particular topic is to take a look at a film identified there in the green box. Iine's great-granddaughter, Henrietta Marie, born at Yungabar, just outside Cairns, provides us with a wonderful investigation of the meaning of objects like the Nautilus shell necklace. When you watch this film, Henrietta invites us to consider who was or who were the people at that time who collected these objects from her ancestors, from people perhaps like her great-grandfather. What were they thinking when they did it? What was important to them? The orange box gives us a little glimpse into perhaps what those thoughts might have been. We know a little bit about the Englishman Derwin Vallance, who collected the necklace and some 90 objects from the Cairns region. We know that he paid the equivalent of a month's wages for them which was significant money at that time. Today, of course, to pay a month's wages for an object such as the necklace would also be significant for many people. We know that he said to his sister in a letter, "Do display them well, as they are a very fine collection." Now, having watched Henrietta, if you make time for that, you consider the perspective of the Englishman, you can then undertake these 5 questions through the routine here, now, there, then. The quote, "What did it mean to them as to what it means to us?" are the words of Henrietta in the film. From these words, we can then list 2 columns. In column A, consider our thoughts today about collecting property from Indigenous people. What do we know today? What are the present stances to do with this particular activity of collecting? In the second question, we consider past positions, past stances about collecting property from the Indigenous people. And here we can invite our students to be time travellers, perhaps to walk in the shoes of Derwent Vallance. Once both columns are complete, we can compare past and present perspectives. And in the fourth question, we can think about, well, what's changed? Why do people in the past not think the way we do today? And finally, we can investigate further. We can invite our students to find out more about the way people thought back then, to develop a deeper appreciation and understanding of what was actually perhaps going on and how that compares with our perspectives today. Now, the other routine that we've coupled with here, now, there, then, is our next routine. Oh, one thing, here we have an example of how here, now, there, then can look like in practice. And this is an example of one of the other fantastic resources on the website Visible Thinking, pz.org. In this instance, what they show you is some work done by upper primary, early secondary students about the institution of marriage and how our values and judgments about that particular topic have changed and why this may be so. So you can take a look at that website and do look at the pictures of practice in case you're wondering how these routines can look in reality in a classroom. But moving on now to part B of our third routine, a tug-of-war routine. And here we have an opportunity to test our knowledge and understanding and perspectives in the classroom, and to invite our students to come to a position that has been considered and can be justified through the question, is it fair for the British Museum to keep the Nautilus shell necklace? Now, in this particular question, there's a very important word, and that is the word fair. We are tackling this question from a values position, and that is one of fairness and human rights. If you wish to know more about that particular value, an important asset to this particular routine is to take a look at the Declaration of Human Rights and to understand something of what it means to take property and what we know about the universal understandings around what it means to do that, and the rightness or otherwise of that. In this particular slide, we can see we've provided our students with possibly 2 quotes. The one in blue is anonymous, and the one in green, we return to the words of Henrietta Mari. In the first instance, the position is that art treasures, like the beautiful Nautilus necklace, should be accessible to the greatest number of people and to scholars, and in practice this means retaining them in the great museums of the world, like the British Museum. That is one perspective. The second in green, though, challenges us to think from another perspective. When Henrietta says, "I and most Aboriginal people acknowledge that if it were not for museums and other such institutions, even less of our cultural property would exist in Australia today." For that, we are grateful, but the fact remains that this property was collected when Aboriginal people were under extreme duress, with governments and missions committed to the methodic and systematic destruction of our cultures and our traditions under extreme colonial policies. So what she reveals is something of the complexity of this issue. There are no easy answers, and let's have a look at the next slide. Here we have a demonstration of practice when this routine is used with Year 2 and Year 3 students on the topic of playing computer games. Is this better than playing games outside? So you can try this routine with very young children. In this instance, the teacher has scribed for the children and provided each of their responses to the question. What you don't see is another slide where we have students who are the maybes. And of course, that's a good place for our students to be, to realise that this is no simple discussion. It's not black and white, that there are questions and there are contexts too that can vary our response to our controversial questions. The thing to remember though, in answering a question like, is it fair for the British Museum to keep the Nautilus shell necklace, that we have tugs, that is, ideas on the side of the yes and the no, and we place those arguments up and we ask the what if questions. What if, for example, you might say to your students that there are people in England who really want to see the Nautilus necklace, but also don't feel comfortable seeing it in the British Museum. Where would we sit then in our response to the question if that was the context? The important aspect too about this particular routine is that your students share their thinking, that they see there are different ways to see this particular topic. And that's important, that we can all have different points of view and we can all change too in our perspective on things. An additional tool with this particular routine is to actually use a rope so that each time a tug is placed on a continuum, we move the rope in one direction or the other so that we can see how our discussion can ebb and flow. And we can invite our students also to come back to the routine once it's done to see if they might change their mind in one way or another once they hear the perspectives of their peers. So there you have, in fact, 4 routines for that particular case study. In the next slide, you have some links that take you on a deeper investigation of this highly contentious, very important topic of the repatriation of cultural property and artefacts to Indigenous peoples here in Australia and abroad.